This is Ankita.
And this is Nalini.
And we are the Prickly Pears, the show where we celebrate uninhibited brown women and their prickly points of view. You're tuned in to season 1. Things our mothers have said over our lifetimes that we agree, don't agree with, and we hopefully will never pass on to our daughters. This episode is about motherhood and our mothers saying you should have your first sonogram by the age of 30. I'm trying really hard to contain the excitement in my voice and not speak at an insane speed. So I'm going to calm down. I'm going to take a breath. Nalini, this is over to you. Could you please introduce our guest for the day?
Of course. First of all, I've been dying to meet her myself. So I'm really excited to be on the same call as Amrita Purkayastha.
Hi, guys.
And you're literally my favorite author of the month, at least after completing this book in the last 2 days, cover to cover. And I want to introduce you in your own words. I think no one says it better than you. In Amrita's own words, she's your average, highly qualified, meme-loving, middle-aged, married woman who makes PPTs for a living. Don't we all? Just like many of us, she has also suffered from the widespread but hardly ever talked about disease, parent pleasing syndrome. And what's not average about her, though, is that she authored this amazing, unputdownable book, Everyday Revolution. Something that totally captures what the essence of Prickly Pears is all about. So we're so glad to have you here, Amrita. Just quickly also telling our viewers the story of how you came about to this. In your 30s, I think you say that you decided it was time to get to know yourself a little better and how your society, environment, and conditions around you had shaped you as a human being. Amrita went about talking to a plethora of women, dived into cultural studies, psychology, neuroscience, and economics in her free time. And through her experiences and through their experiences, she began to make sense of some repeated patterns that were very visible among women. And then she gave us this book, which all of us should read about. But over to you, Amrita. Thank you for joining us. And do tell us again what your mother said.
Thank you so much, Nalini. That's quite an introduction. And a couple of things actually keep reminding myself that this book came about, I think, from this sense of this dysphoria that we almost feel when we are a certain age, where we start looking back at our childhood experiences and also look at the world around us and try and make sense of those two connecting. And I think that's what these kind of researches or these kind of even talks and, this whole experience of meeting women in my research, all of those began from there. And I'm so glad that you have read it. It's very, very heartening to meet someone who has read the book. It's been a labor of love, and that's just really been my first baby. And I guess we will talk about the second one in the making.
I love how you've let the secret away.
Well, it's not quite a secret. If I zoom out a little, it's no secret at all.
Absolutely. And Nalini's been gushing about the book a little, and I have to agree. It is like, as I was reading it, I paused and I thought about all of the things that you'd written. And this episode comes from one of the sections of your book about motherhood. So I am going to, probe a little bit about your lived experiences regarding motherhood. Like when you were younger, let's rewind to maybe 20. What did you think about motherhood and your relationship to it back then?
We don't think as much when we are say in our teenage years, etc. We think of it as a theoretical, distant future experience that we might or might not experience in the future. Mostly we think that we will, because that's the template that has been taught to us. We see most women who are elder to us, senior to us, have kids. We are taught motherly traits very early on, right? Those teacups, those small teacups, those Barbie dolls, dressing up our dolls, etc. We're almost sort of conditioned from very young on that is the role that you might play in the future. Of course, nobody tells you like that, but we learn those things, right? Through our toys or dolls or whatever. So very far back on, of course, I had a vague idea that that's a life experience that I might have. I didn't consciously start thinking about it. But yes, when you are in your 20s, especially when you get married, you get a lot of advice. And, you guys would know and you guys would resonate that there are just way too many voices in our lives telling us what to do throughout our lives, actually. I think that's a general human experience, so to say, but especially to women. I think there are a lot of shoulds that come our way, right? There are a lot of shoulds in different areas of our lives where we are told we should do this. And of course, there are many that came directly from my mother, and a little bit about my mom. I think I write about her at length in my book because, some of these relationships really form you and they are very formative to who you become. Of course, you have ample chance to change and recalibrate, but a lot of instincts and a lot of things that make who you are these people who were your primary caregivers, so to say. So my mom has been the perfect mother. She used to work, but her whole universe were her kids. She had a well-kept home. She had disciplined kids, if I might say so myself. She was always very, very dutiful, very, very proper. Her home should be perfect. Her kids should be well fed, and all of that. And she did that consistently for many years. And for many years, I think I was very blind to the effort that she has been putting. Because all of us take our mothers and her labor for granted. And we don't see her for who she really is till much later. I think she's always our mother, not the human behind that relationship. So she has been that person. She has been my mother for, I think, till I started dismantling these things a little more intellectually, a little more, theoretically, so to say. And that's when it became slightly clearer to me where she came from, etc. I blamed her for many things in my life, all through my life. But I think,
Like we all do.
yeah, and it's the easiest one. And I think a lot of the blame do rest with them as well, because and I think a lot of blame of anything that I do with my kid in future will rest with me, because nobody is a perfect parent and we never know what unconsciously or consciously we end up teaching our kids. But thankfully, we are human beings and we change and we can recalibrate and we can think deeply and we can, at any point, we can change the course of our lives. But having said that, my mom, particularly about motherhood, she's like any other traditional person who wanted me to get married by 25, have kids by 30. And around the time when I was 30, I think she almost went on an overdrive and a craze, as in, if not now, when? And I think that's the only time I saw her panic because, I have lived a traditional life. To be honest, I've not been a rebellious kid. I think looking back, I have been fairly conventional, and that comes from the parent pleasing syndrome in many ways. I've always wanted to make my parents proud, did what they said, engineering, MBA, college. And, it's a pattern that I've followed. And I don't think I've given them a lot of chance to be very disappointed in me. But I think around this time, when I was not planning to have kids by 30, 31, 32, 33, I think they were losing a little bit of patience. And that's about the time, for the first time, I started experiencing this disappointment in them. And I think it stings, when you're not used to something like that, when you're not, you're not used to that reaction from your parents you have worked all your life to make proud. So that's been my journey, but I write about it a lot in the book. I think by the time this book came out, I wrote about it. I was writing this book for the last 5 years, and in the book, I make it very clear that I wanted to be child-free for my life. And it's been something that I was very clear from, say, the age of 25, since I got married. Me and Aditya both, my husband, we were very clear that we didn't want kids. And of course, there was a journey of changing our minds, and it happened over the last 1.5, 2 years.
Amrita, before you tell us how you changed your mind, can you, and I have the book here, so, tell me what lens did you go to make sure that you don't conceive?
Oh, there are, of course, we are educated, liberated women, thankfully living in a country where contraception and many other options are fairly legal and available. So, of course, we were very disciplined about it. And I write about it in the book that we were more disciplined about this than our financial investments and whatever. So we have been clear that this is not something that we wanted. And however many pujas and jagratas my mother-in-law and my mother had kept in our universe, this is what was going through. So if one decides to not have kids, I think as a couple, one has many, many options. And what is important, I think there are a couple of things I think anybody, and it's ironical because still about 2022, I was doing similar podcasts and interviews with other women, and I was actually talking about being child-free and what that comes with. And what are the many, many mental, social, and intellectual sort of, things that go in your mind and the things that you need to balance out. But now it's a different thing. And of course, how I changed my mind, if it's an interesting story, I'll share if you guys are interested. But yeah, motherhood is like that, right? It's a big deal. It's made to be a big deal. It's not something that someone who does decide to take on that role or someone who does decide to not take on that role can take it lightly. Either ways, it's a very, very important life choice. You jump at it or you don't. It is a convention that is difficult to sort of not be a part of.
So, how did you change your mind?
I don't know whether it's a replicable story for anyone, but over the last 1.5 years, actually, I realized that my conviction on it was not as strong as I thought. And I write about this in the book, and the structure that I went to was very clear that, in both parts, whether you decide to be a mother or you don't, there are miseries attached to it. There will be things that you would not like in that path. And I think I learned this along the way, talking to many, many women. Most of them married, having kids, etc. But many who have not, who have decided to not have kids and not take this path. But I realized very early on that both these paths have difficulties and very specific kind of misery attached to it. And one has to figure out what kind of misery they are okay to live with in the long term. So whether it is the disappointment of not having free time to go party at any hour of the day, or it is being left alone, possibly because there are a lot of social circles beyond the age of, say, 35, 36, where your friends have just two or like a kid or two, and you're the only one who is drinking, you're the only one who can stay back late, others have to go back home, feed their babies, and there are less and less common social experiences for you. So there are many, many things. I can count many, and me and Aditya almost made like a chart of what are the things that are likely to happen in the next 5 years, and then what are the things similarly that are likely to happen in the next 5 years if we do have a kid, and what is the kind of misery we are okay with, and what is the experience that we want to have in this one life that we have. So what is it that we want to do with this limited time that we have on this planet? So we had that intellectual, theoretical, made an Excel sheet, figured out what is it that we want to do with the next 20, 30 years of our life, and then decided to jump in.
I love that. I'm also very curious if Nalini has changed her mind after listening to Amrita's tales, because
No, I would highly recommend she do that.
I think it's very interesting that all three of us are in completely different phases of life. And Nalini and I were chatting in prep for this pod, and she was talking about how her mom calls her every single weekend. But Nalini, can you share what you've been thinking about motherhood and just the impact of what Amrita's shared?
I mean, there's a lot more people than just Amrita that tell me things that are, on why they decided to become mothers. Many of them, unfortunately, say like it was because of the pressure, but I'm so glad that Amrita's decision was purely hers and Aditya's based on the research and the Excel sheets that they put together. So that's amazing.
There's one thing, it did play a role, but there was a physical condition, there was a medical condition that I was sort of told a year and a half back, when I was told there was a fibroid in my uterus, and I was told that if you don't want to have kids, we can remove the fibroid because you have a tendency of developing it. And that was like the point where we had to decide, because then we couldn't change our mind, right, later. And I think that kind of a trigger or an experience which makes you decide really sort of brings to the surface what you really want. So I think that also helped. I pray and I hope that that kind of a point doesn't come to everybody's life, but it does help when there is a cutoff that you keep for yourself. And because most decisions in life need to have a cutoff. So if Nalini, that helps in any way. I'm not sure it does, but
No, I think it's just very relevant for everyone listening to this, that there are things, that you wish you were to do before you died. And if you were faced with the death of your uterus coming soon to you, I think you would have to decide. If I were in your position, probably I would do the same. But what Ankita was saying, like my partner and I have been talking for a while about It's been a few years since we got married in the family, and we are already got married in our 30s, defying the norms, all of that. We've been talking about what's the right thing to do in this case for us, and what we have every weekend after that call when we have the discussion. Right now we are coming down to the same conclusion, that because of what we follow spiritually quite a lot, that if you have a child and you give your everything to that child, you have very less remaining for the rest of the world, in the sense that if I were to not have a child and I were to give everything that I have to the world without expecting anything in return, just like you would with a child, maybe like I can have more impact. Like we are all products of internalized capitalism, I think. So maybe like there could be more impact just on the world if we did that. That's just where we are at, and I'm sure like this can change at any point.
And it might not change. I think a lot of people think that, there are women and girls, and I had seen a documentary where they said that they wanted to remove their uterus at the age of 18 and 19. And a lot of people told them that you will change your mind in the future, because we don't take women's conviction very seriously in our societies, right? We always think that we can teach you. You don't know better. You're not, your conviction and your decision doesn't matter, and you will change your mind. But you very well may not, and you should not, for any other reason but your own.
Exactly. You were talking about all these advice that people gave you, different things. What is the weirdest advice that you've gotten on this?
Oh, there are many, yeah. There are, and in a woman's life, and you would resonate at every stage. You're told how to be a good wife, a good daughter, good woman in general. But the funny one, and why I had written, I think I've written about this in the book as well, is because when you get married, people think that having a baby is almost like a booster dose for your relationship, and people almost think that unless you have a baby, there is a problem in your relationship. And by the time we had like 5-6 years of our marriage done, many relatives and many people around started thinking that whether everything's fine between the two of us, since we don't have a kid. So there was this neighborhood auntie who said that, tawa garam hai tab omelette bana lena chahiye. So you should have a baby in the first or second year of the marriage, because then the tawa apparently gets thanda, which means that the spark in your relationship gets sort of cold. And then of course you're now a little in a place where you're not able to do it because it's been 6 years. So it's been many and varied, and I had developed a very thick skin, and I still do. I think that's been the gift of 30s, right? That you no longer bother so much.
If you could summarize, Amrita, what would you say your prickly point of view regarding motherhood is? You've said a lot about it that gave me food for thought, and also our listeners. But then if you had to summarize, saying you've gone through so many experiences, many women, I think, irrespective of where they are in the world, have gone through it. What would you say is this is something that is conventional and this is what needs to change, or this is my view?
Spoke about it, right? Being a mother or not being a mother, both paths will have difficulties and miseries attached, as would any major decision in your life. And I really, really hope, and I want, actually, till last year, I was associated with a lot of clubs and groups of women who had decided to be child free. And I intend to continue to be a part of those groups, because I really, really feel that that is a decision which is increasingly becoming a little difficult. It has always been very, very difficult, but I think even now, the way celebrities flaunt their pregnancies, it's a whole fashion statement almost to get pregnant. And many women who go through infertility, who go through a lot of troubles behind the scene, miscarriages, abortion being, not a fundamental right in the US again, all of these are increasingly taking us back to, say, the 1800s. And I feel very, very strongly about the fact that this is a right and a decision that should lie with the women 100%. Because as I'm going through the pregnancy journey myself, if you are a mother without your choice, without your 100% conviction and consent, it's almost like slavery, because it is worse than that, because then your body is in service to something that you are not fully convinced on, and that's not a life path I would wish on anyone. So the conviction and the decision of having a kid should rest with a woman, and that's just really been my learning from it. And I wanted to make sure 100% that this is something that I'm convinced about. And that would be my take. And of course, my doors and my inbox is open for anybody who wants any more personal anecdotes and gyan about it. But overall, I really, really think that this is a decision that should come from 100% consent and conviction, and not from pressure or it's cool or it's time or anything else.
I love that. Will we ever get to see the charts and the Excel sheets?
I think, yeah, they will be very, very interesting for you, because those, I think I write about some of those in the book as well. But yeah, those are hilarious now that I open them. Even now, when I read the chapter on being child free, I feel like there are things that I want to add on, and especially
Maybe book two.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But I think the chapter that I write on pedestalization on motherhood, how motherhood is glamorized, and how the glamorized in the sense that not really in the way that it's empowering, but in the way that we put on a lot on women and we expect a lot of labor from women, especially mothers, and we almost think that it's natural that she will put so much effort. But now that I'm going through it, it really makes me realize that mothers do go through a lot. And I have been 100% nicer to my mother since my first trimester and the nausea set in. And I think we all should be like, we should be forever grateful to the person who birthed us, because that's an experience that I don't think, unless you go through it, you know how difficult it is.
I want to bring it back to a slightly more prickly perspective as well that you said in the book, which was that the world is run by inseminators and not bearers. And that is why we see motherhood the way we see it. We see mothers being pedestalized but not empowered. That was something that really deeply touched me, I would say. And, just thank you for saying that. Like, not enough people keep remembering the fact that this world that we live in is not written or made by us or by people like us, which is so important, as you rightly said, to have your own opinion, thought, judgment on whatever you decide to do. So I think really, I totally agree.
I think it's very, very important, Nalini, that we women see the political and the personal and live by it. I think our lives are a window to the way that the world works, but we should always look at our decisions in the context, and we should dig deeper. I think the major life change that has happened with me in my 30s and in the process of writing this book, and I'm forever indebted to the 100 women who decided to sort of spend some time with me and share their perspective, is that those perspectives really opened the window to the world for me. And I started realizing that our personal decisions are often political, right? And as in they are derived and they are manufactured almost by what is the world telling us. And it's very, very important that we dismantle that and we really dig deeper and own our choices in a way that is true to us. So
And the world, when we say the world for a young child actually starts with their mother. And that is why we keep coming back to this thing that, like, the world, when you're less than, let's say, 6 years old, right? From 0 to 6 years old, you're like 90% of your time is with your parents, or 80% of your accumulated time is with your parents. And what your mother is telling you, of like, which is based on her opinion and what she has gotten from the world and what's been told to her, like, that's so important in shaping us and shaping our views in the rest of our lives.
absolutely. Sorry, we didn't catch Ankita's prickly views on motherhood, did we? We didn't catch that.
On motherhood, yes, her old and her.
I don't know how prickly my points of view are, because I genuinely abided by the timeline that was set out by the society, right? I was like, that's it. This makes sense. You get married at 27, have your first kid at 30, have your second kid at whatever age, and then they're teenagers and they're off when they're like 45, 50, and then I can just. My retirement fund is for myself, not for their college, nothing else. They can figure their life. Like, I'm going to have a ripe 0 to 30 years old and then the great 50 plus years old. I don't want to be a mom of teenagers when I'm 50 to 60. No, like, I'll have creaking bones. I do not have the patience. I anyway don't have a lot of patience in life. But clearly, no matter what the plan,
Yeah, but where are you right now?
yeah, no, I don't even have like a stable partner. So I have, like, I know I'm not going to have kids without a legal document saying I'm married, though God knows when that'll happen. If it'll happen. Now I'm just like, let the world dictate if I have a kid or not. I'm definitely not having one if I don't have enough money for a nanny. I know for sure I am not running behind teenagers. Like I'll give them away to someone else for a few years, send them to boarding school. Yeah, but like I'm very, very precious about my scope of freedom.
Your problems. Can I please give you a suggestion? Why don't you adopt a teenager whenever you decide to have a kid?
No,
Especially with Ireland having so many rogue teenagers. Maybe one can lead to a better life.
I don't even know if I like teenagers. I would have a kid from like the baby years. I actually don't even know if I'd. We'll feel figure. Like I've not made up my mind. I have no diktat in life or which direction it'll.
You're fully entitled to the time, Ankita, and take all the time that you want. I know that I'm sure you would have stories of your own of people asking you to get married and getting a stable partner and all of that. And it does start playing on your mind, but I'm sure you're smart enough and you'll take your own time. But feel fully entitled to the time because, that's all ours and that's nobody else's.
I absolutely resonated when you said in my 30s I grew a thick skin because my skin has never been thicker.
It could also be aging, but
No, aging makes you thinner.
oh yeah, sorry. That makes.
Yeah, so I'm having to work extra hard to get that thick skin because the age isn't helping.
Before we end today's episode, I really loved a few lines that your dad said to you in Bengali. That's sort of like was an inspiration to you. Would you mind saying those lines out and tell us what they mean?
The Lorai 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 Chaiban. Okay, yeah. So I think this is a communist manifesto line. I think he did work as a CPI worker in Bengal, and of course their generation have seen a lot of dislocation, a lot of political upheaval. So their political and social outlook is based on that time. And Lorai 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 Chai in Bengali means let's fight and hustle always. Let's never give up. And that always resonates with me because there is a comfort in conforming. There is a lot of fatigue in rebellion, and I have always felt that I think one of the reasons that possibly I treaded a very conventional path all my life is because I was a lazy person who has the energy to fight so many elderly, so many advice, so many people around who seem to know better than you. And it's very easy to toe the line. And I think that's why patriarchy sort of still rules, right? Because it's such a strong structure and it always is easier to sort of conform because not everybody has the energy or the will to be a rebel. But I have realized that there is a lot of peace, comfort, a lot of joy in rebellion and in hustling and in trying to live your life the way that you want to. And that's what that line means, that let us always fight and hustle. Whatever I'm saying today or whatever I have written in the book has possibly been said a million other times. There have been a lot of revolutionary women who have made the path for us a little bit easier with their bravery. And we might never have to be as brave as they had to be. My grandmother had to be much braver to make my mother, study, because at that time that was revolutionary. I might not have to fight those battles because of those women, but I will fight the battles that I need to fight today for my daughters and the future generation coming in. And I feel that that gives a lot of joy, actually. Forget many other things that it gives. It gives you energy, it gives you passion, it gives you solidarity because you get to meet other strong women in this journey. But I think more than that, it gives you a lot of joy as well. So I really, really believe in that. And that's that line.
And thank you for normalizing fighting and hustling, right? I'm glad that there are lines like that in our Indian culture. There are sentences that have just been over time buried because we've just been normalizing conformity, as you rightly said, and especially for women. But I loved it because it just talks about larai or fighting being the right or the normal way of life or the thing to do. And yeah, I think with that, it's time.
Amrita, thank you so much. Thank you for. I'm leaving here very inspired. Prickly Pears will fight the true fight, but I'm going to get us out of here.
Thank you, guys.
On behalf of the Prickly Pears and Amrita, we are out.